I was 8 years old when my Aunt Wendy, who lived in Tennessee, gave me a porcelain Joker doll that had what looked like a red teardrop. We were getting ready for bed, and since we were staying with them, we didn't have anywhere to put it. My mom set it on the shelf in the front room. While my mom and I were lying there talking, we got the feeling that something was watching us. When we looked around, no one was in there, and everyone was asleep. My mom looked over to the Joker doll and noticed it was pointed toward us. Knowing she had faced it toward the door, my mom got up and turned it to face the wall. We laid there talking for a few minutes when we heard a scratching noise on the shelf, like something heavy was being turned around. When we looked over to the shelf, the Joker doll was pointed toward us again. Thinking it was my cousin, we went in her room to see. She was asleep. I knew this as I hit her leg, and she was never a good faker. After realizing she was asleep, we went back into the front room, and Mai laid the Joker flat on its face. Later that night, with everyone still asleep, my mom got up to use the bathroom and realized that the Joker was lying on its back. So my mom got it and put it in a bag with our clothes, and the feeling as if something was watching us left. The next morning, we got a call about a house. In the process, my mom told my dad that she wanted to get rid of the doll. My dad said no, because my aunt gave it to me. We were unloading some stuff, and my mom put the Joker doll in our hallway closet, hoping my dad wouldn't find it. Much to our dislike, my dad watched my mom put it there. My dad brought it in my bedroom and put it on my dresser. He said, "This is where I want to stay." The feeling of being watched returned. I was lying there, glanced at my dresser to the Joker doll, and noticed it had an evil smile on its face. I hollered for my mom, and when she came in, she noticed it too. So she put it in my drawer. The next morning, we were telling my dad about what happened. He was not believing in that stuff, told us to shut up and that we were making it up. My mom decided to call my Aunt Wendy and ask her if they ever noticed anything out of the ordinary, and my aunt said yes. That was the reason they put in the shed out back. Later, that night my dad came home from work, and we told him what my aunt had told us. Unfortunately, my aunt denied it all, making my mom and I look like idiots. So, again that night, my mom put it back in the dresser drawer. She wanted to turn the coffee pot on so Dad would have coffee the next morning and went to bed. The next day, my mom and I were sitting in the kitchen. My dad came in the kitchen, holding the Joker doll, and told us that he said he wanted to stay on my dresser. Being 8 years old, I knew I had better listen to him, and I went and put it on my dresser. He then started cussing, saying that he didn't see any problem with the Joker doll, and we better keep it on my dresser. He didn't believe in stuff like that. I asked my mom if she would lie down with me, and she said yes. Still feeling an evil presence in the room, my mom said a prayer with me and we fell asleep. The next morning, when my dad got up, he came into the room where we were and told my mom he wanted the doll out of there. My mom says that she thought he didn't believe in things like we've been telling him. Yet he just now decides that he wants the doll out of the house? He began telling her that the night before, he got up to use the bathroom, stepped into my room, and the Joker doll had an evil smile on its face, and he heard an evil laugh. Now, believing us, he went in my room, got the Joker doll, and took it outside and tried to burn it. Only the clothes burnt, and the face turned black from the smoke. Then, he got it out of the trash barrel and hit it with a hammer, but only part of its face chipped. Getting freaked out, he took it to the neighborhood dumpster and threw it in there. We never saw it again, and everything in my room went back to normal. A week later, I became friends with a boy in my class, and we all were over at his parents for supper when I looked in the front room. On a shelf, there was a Joker doll, just like the one I used to have. Later, my mom asked if she could look at it, and she noticed a mark where it was made that mine didn't have, and it didn't have the red teardrop. After seeing that, my mom asked where they got it from. They told her what store, and my mom called my Aunt Winnie to ask her about my doll. She told my mom the same store. Mom asked my aunt about the teardrop, and my aunt said she asked the store clerk about it, as it was the only one. The teardrop didn't look like any kind of paint, that it looked more like blood. When my dad got on the phone, he asked my aunt about it again. My aunt told him what they had experienced. They thought that it didn't have anything to do with the Joker doll, even though she said they felt an evil feeling. like someone watching them, which went away when the Joker doll was in the shed. You can choose to believe this or not, but if you don't, please don't post any rude comments. I was wondering if the reason the Joker doll was like that could have been made by someone that was into witchcraft. E was sitting in the front room reading a book, listening to my portable CD player, when I heard one of the kitchen chairs scoot out and hit the washer. Thinking it was my mom, I got up and walked into the kitchen, but no one was there. Noticing the bolt on the door was still locked, I pushed the chair back in, went into the front room and heard the same thing again. But only this time, I heard a man cuss and he sounded angry. So I got up, turned everything off, locked the front door, and when I got to Melissa, she was in bed. So I walked onto the nursing home. When I got to the nursing home, the RN told me what room my mom was in. I found my mom, told her what happened, and she asked if she could leave early. When we got to our apartment, everything was like normal. So my mom fixed us some hamburgers and went to bed. Sunday morning, I got up and was taking a shower when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Unfortunately, I forgot to grab a towel. So thinking it was my mom, I asked her if she could give me a towel, but no answer. So I forgot about the towel and got dressed. I looked in my mom's bedroom to see if she was in there, but nothing or no one was in there. So I checked my bedroom, still nothing. Thinking it was my imagination, doubting that because of the experience I had when I was a kid. I was heading down the stairs when I felt a gust of cool breeze pass by me. Knowing there wasn't any windows up, I ran down the stairs. I asked my mom if she was upstairs, and she said no. Then I told her what I had felt on the stairs, and she said she had felt it too that morning. That night, my sister Kay and brother-in-law Wayne came. They asked if they could stay with us until they found place, and my mom said yes. I baked some cupcakes, and we were sitting around talking. When I looked over at my niece, I noticed she was looking at the corner and said hi. The second time she'd done it, she said hi and waved, thinking she was doing it to me. I looked at her again and noticed that she was looking behind me. So thinking it was their dog, I turned around and nothing was there. My sister and brother-in-law thought she was doing it to me, but I didn't say anything. After we finished talking and everything, we all decided to go to bed. My sister, her husband, and my niece was taking my bedroom for the night. Wayne asked me if he could listen to my radio. So I said he could, and he switched it to a classic rock station, and I went on to bed. The next morning, Wayne was telling Mom and me that he had the radio on classic rock and was drifting off to sleep. The radio had changed to jazz, never believing in stuff like that. He said it freaked him out, and he went downstairs and fell asleep on the couch. 15 minutes later, my sister Kay and my niece came down, and Kay said that my niece kept laughing like something was making her laugh. Kim said she just smiled and went to sleep. Later that day, my mom seen the manager of the apartments, and she told her that there was an apartment for Kim and Wayne to move into. So after helping them move their stuff in, later that night Wayne said he was going to get some beer for him and Kim. When he got back, he asked if one of us went to our apartment, and we said no. And he said when he drove by as he was leaving, the kitchen light flicked on and off, and he seen a black shadow. He said he figured it was one of us. So later that night, Kim and Wayne stayed the night again, and we noticed that their dog kept looking at the stairs and growling, but after a few minutes he stopped. The next night they stayed in their apartment. It started storming and the power went out, so my mom and I got some flashlights and candles. We lit the candles and turned the flashlights off to save the batteries. And we were sitting on the couch when the air started having a violent, angry feeling to it. Not thinking anything about it, we looked at the bottom step and seen a black figure of a person. We turned the flashlights on, but nothing was there. Then when we turned the flashlight off again, we seen the figure walk by our window. So we turned the flashlight on again, but nothing was there then. Even though the feel of the violent angriness was still there, it went away when the electricity came back on a few minutes later. So when the lights were back on, my mom went up and was going to her jewelry box and found a cross necklace she had for a long time and hung it up. We didn't have anything more happen that night. So the next day, my mom asked the manager of the apartment if anything ever happened in the apartment, and she told my mom all she knows is before she came manager that there was a guy and his wife that lived there, The guy came home one day after work and found his wife and cousin together. They got in a fight, and he shot his wife, his cousin, and then turned around and shot himself. After that, we moved out, and they could never keep anyone in that place. A couple had moved in there, and the next night, they moved out. A month later, a mother, her boyfriend, and her son moved in there, and we became friends with them. We told them that we used to live there, without us mentioning anything to them. She asked us if we moved because of things that they were experiencing. Without us saying anything, she started explaining everything that happened to us, and that her dog, which is a lovable dog, would go sit at the bottom of the steps and growl, like he wasn't going to let someone come down. To this day, the apartment doesn't feel right, and no one will stay in it longer than a month. They said there was one person that lived in it for a year, because that was all they could afford at the time. Sorry this story was so long. I just want to share with you another experience I had. You can choose to believe it or not. I explained everything to how I remembered it, which it isn't something I have been able to forget. I want to say I haven't been scared or under any stress at the time of these occurrences. It happens right after I turn off the lights and television, so I know it's not me going in and out of sleep or anything like that. I am wide awake, being very aware of my surroundings. These images and such do not follow my normal patterns of imagination. I can't really explain it any better than that. You'd have to know me and my mind to understand that. I promise to you, I wouldn't even post these things if I thought it could more than likely just be my imagination. The proof may come in its own time. But for now, all I have to go on is what I see and hear. I believe this gift that I may or may not have may be finally developing. It might all be a very wild imagination, but there's no way I could just make up some of this stuff. The way the images start out so simple and then unfolds is very strange to me. It's normally just random things flashing, but this is so different. It's like they know I would be scared if it all came at once. I started seeing this image of these hands turning some kind of crank. One hand is still while the other is turning in a clockwise rotation. I was just thinking it could be some type of churn or something. I had no clue. Then the image began to widen and became clearer. It was an old type of hand drill. I didn't realize there was any importance to this image at the time. Strange things go bump in the night. 3, then the spirit started to come forth. I then understood what the drill was being used for. This man was suspended on some type of thin wall, like a plywood board. His arms were stretched out like as on a cross. The arms went behind the board at the elbows and were tied off through other holes in the board. These 2 other men began using this hand drill and puncturing through the board through this man's hands. It was as if they were crucifying him in a very horrifying way. Once they had the holes drilled through the plywood and through his hands, they ran cord/wire through and tied it off. I began to ask this man, "Why did they do this to you?" He replied, "Because I am a homosexual." Back in those times, and even some places today, being gay wasn't exactly accepted or tolerated by many. These men were probably regarded as heroes by fellow coworkers, those afraid of being sexually harassed by this gay man. But that is just speculation. I want to say this happened in the 1950s. I don't know why. It's more of a feeling than just a guess, and that is somewhat confirmed by the hand drill they were using. These men were torturing this man for being gay. Nothing more, nothing less. He told me the 2 men were co-workers. They were good friends before, and one day he decided to tell them about this secret he'd been keeping from them, thinking they wouldn't feel any different about him. He was very wrong. I asked him how they killed him. He told me that they just beat him to death while he was suspended on that board, calling him all kinds of derogatory names and cursing him to hell, hitting him in the face with tools, bare hands, and pretty much anything they could pick up. I didn't see any other images of this experience other than the beginning where his hands were being drilled through. I think this was more for my protection. He didn't want me to see the worst of it. The rest was told to me by him. I felt bad at this point, and not just because of what happened to him, but because I was almost completely ignoring him thinking about writing this story today. And I wasn't doing much to help him. I kept apologizing over and over, saying that I was sorry this happened to him. He didn't want my apologies, though. He wanted these men to pay for what they did. He told me they were still alive today. They are old men now, with families and grandchildren. I told him that they would pay in their own time. If not on this earth, then when they stand before their maker. I don't think that comforted him much. He said he wants to cause them as much misery as they did him, but I told him that would not make things any better. He began to fade after that, and I heard nothing more. I hope I did something to help this person. I felt so bad about ignoring him, being so selfish, and thinking only about how great this is going to be for a story. I'm pretty sure he was upset about that. I even apologized to him about it. He didn't seem to mind, but I realize I will have to work on that. I was lucky he didn't just leave after that, but now I'm rambling. This occurrence happened in the mid-90s. At that time, I was working security at a gambling establishment. One of my duties was to make sure everything was shut down and locked up after the last customer left. On this night, I was walking through the upper level and had just turned off the manager's light and TV and locked her door. This level is shaped like a horseshoe with the center open to the level below. It has several private booths. They look more like the living room of an expensive house that are rented out on a monthly basis. The only way to access this area was the elevator on the east side. There's a fire exit on the west side, but the doors are rigged to sound an alarm if the doors are opened. Okay, enough background. I had always had an uneasy feeling when I worked here from the time I started until I left, but I could never figure out why I felt that way. As I said, I had locked up the office and was walking down the hallway to check the suites when I felt a gust of wind past me going in the same direction. Now, being several stories up this building did not have any windows that opened, and the doors to the roof were all alarmed. As soon as the wind blew past me, I heard a noise behind me. When I turned around, I found the office door opened and the lights and TV turned back on. I know I was the only person on any of the upper floors. It's after 2 a.m., and the closest person to me is stationed in the basement at the employee entrance. Anyway, I returned to the office and shut off everything and locked the door and started down the hall again. When it happened again, same rush of wind, and the office opened and TV and lights on. At this time, I thought the officer downstairs was messing with me, but if he was, I could not figure out how he was getting on the floor. Without me hearing him, I walked back to the office and called him on the phone to see if he was there or not. He answered on the first ring. I told him I was just checking in and was going to finish checking the building. I locked the office again and headed down the hall. I had made it to the first dining area when I felt like I had been hit by a rabid lineman. I was picked up off my feet and knocked about 5 feet down the hall. A little about me, I stand 6 feet 3 inches, and at that time weighed 270 pounds. So it took some force to pick me up, much less throw me 5 feet. Needless to say, I left the top level to whatever it was that wanted me gone that night. After I got home that morning, I was getting ready to take a shower and found a huge bruise on my right side, just above my waist, exactly where I felt the thing hit me. I tried to get a little background on the building. I spoke to several people who worked on the construction crew, and they all told me, on separate occasions, about finding bones all over the area where the building was put up. They also said they found other items that looked like pottery. I never found anything in the papers, but the person that owns the place is very much connected with the political scene in this state. So I'm not surprised that bad or questionable press would not show up on him or his properties. Last night, I was lying in bed, and I started seeing blurred images in my mind. 3 different spirits came forth. First, it was just a close-up of the face. Then I started seeing full images. It was a light-skinned black woman in her late 20s or early 30s. She didn't speak to me much in words. It was mostly just images. I was seeing her death. She was in this container filled with blood-stained water with some sort of clear plexiglass top. I kept seeing her face up against the plexiglass. I don't think she drowned, though. I believe she was shot in the head before being put into this container. For what purpose, I do not know. Her boyfriend or husband is the one that killed her. She's always sad now, and I think it's because the boyfriend/husband wasn't found guilty of her murder. The second image I started seeing was a little white boy between the age of 4 and 6 wearing blue jeans and cowboy boots. He mumbled a lot. not really saying full sentences. Things like, my toys and not alone. He was actually already talking while I was seeing images of the black woman. He sounded like he was talking to himself most of the time. I didn't really understand the rest of what he was saying. I asked him if he saw a light. He responded, no light. I can't find it. I told him to just keep looking. Then he started saying, God sees, he chose you. Soldiers are coming. I want angel wings. He kept mumbling more things I couldn't really understand. I think he was talking to himself again, though. The last image I began to see was an old woman. She had to be in her late 80s or so. She, like the boy and the black woman, was already walking around while I was talking to the boy like she was waiting on me to finish with him. I believe she is the woman that said to me, Trent, we can hear everything you're saying the other night. I think it was her because she said it right after dirty thoughts came into my mind, and it just sounds like something an older woman would do. She didn't really say much. I believe she was looking for her husband. She wants to find him before she can. Move on. She didn't say much else to me, nothing of importance that I can remember. I would have really thought this was all my imagination, but it all went away just as quick as it came, after the old woman left. There weren't any other images or voices that came to me. I didn't have any thoughts of them after they left. It was just peaceful thinking before I went to sleep.